All right, so if you're just joining us and you're looking at this picture right here, you're wondering, why is that a Chevy pickup truck bed upside down? That's really kind of what it looks like. And the wheel went right about here, and there was an accident. And, anyway, so... All right, back to cooling. What the heck? Air-cooled engines, proper care and maintenance. Yeah, it can't be understated, all that stuff. What the heck? Never know what you need to know. All right, so parts. What kind of parts were we talking about? We talked about a whole bunch of stuff. Parts. We have the cylinder head temp. C-Y-L-I-N-D-E. Cylinder head temp gauge. Also called the CHT, which by a cruel sense of irony also stands for something when I was in the Navy, collection, holding, and transfer. In other words, the SHIT tank. Just ignore me when I rattle on like that. All right, so cylinder head temp, that's what it is. So there are two types of probes. So we'll put probes, which I showed you. We had the bayonet type, and we have the spark plug washer type. Which one is better? Bayonet. Some people call the spark plug washer type the spark plug temperature gauge probe, as a joke. A lot of planes, like Harry's cool plane, has one probe. So if you have one probe, then
What's your best guess?
if only one probe, placed on the hottest cylinder. And it is not always the one that you think it is. Like, what do you think would be the hottest one on your Lycoming? The one in the back, which is the number 4, but sometimes it's the number 3, which is also the back, the other side, just forward a little bit. It has to do with the way the air comes in with the prop wash. It's like one side gets more pressure than the other. I do think that...
Is it like the slipstream effect, but for the engine?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, C, D, let me see. Well, let me just, hang on, I'll write that one. Well, not always, I'll put it here, not always the rearmost. All right, ideal, I-D-E-A, ideal CHT, which stands for cylinder head temp, is under, give me a number, under what? 400 degrees. And that's from Lycoming Service Instruction 1049 Delta. All right, this is going to be number 2 for no real good reason. So cowling. So it's with a W. It's not cowing. It's cow with an L. So not cowing. That's something else. All right. It is a pressure cowl. What does that mean? It's a pressure cowl.
Gets inflated.
It's like it gets inflated. Trying. If it was anything but aluminum, it probably would get. Or if it was expandable material, it would inflate. Air comes in, we want to inflate it. So there's a lot of pressure built up in there. Is there pressure on the top or the bottom? You should say, well, it depends. Is it an inverted engine or not inverted, right? Is it, if it's a radial engine, then it's going to be the whole front. But it's the part around the cylinders is always pressurized. So it's a pressure cowl. We have high pressure, low velocity. Where? On top, usually. Did I go too far? On top. Usually. That's an interesting word. It's kind of like sort of. I love sort of. Just changes the meaning of everything. I love you, sort of. You did a good job, sort of. It's airworthy, sort of. Okay, low pressure. We'll have to say high velocity. bottom. Usually, sort of. And the low pressure, the low pressure, the low pressure air below draws air across the cylinder. Draws air from high pressure down across the cylinders. There. And we talked about cowl flaps. And for your operation. So tell me about the cowl flaps. What do they do when they're open?
Close on most planes, but they
Well, when they're open, what is the purpose of having it open? What does it do? Does what?
Creates a low pressure.
Creates more of a low pressure area, so it draws even more of the high pressure air down. So cowl flaps, operation. Well, there's many different types of cowl flaps, and I guess I could tell you there are manual ones. Manual with a lever, you just move a lever up and down. We have electric. What kind do you have, Harry?
Manual.
Electric, which is a little button because it's too hard to do this with a lever, so you have a little button to go up, down, close, open. And there's also some automatic, A-U-T-O, yeah, we'll do that.
Is it
Automatically thermostatically controlled. Thermostatically controlled. In other words, there's a thermostat, and when it reaches a certain temperature, they start to open up. And cowl flaps aren't necessarily an all or nothing thing. You can have open, closed, partial, in between. Do you have multiple positions on yours?
big lever down in the middle?
Yeah, with
Select
little.
full open, full close.
One of the interesting things about these is, I don't know if it's interesting, is they're often misrigged. So you have to check them for proper rigging. I should just put this proper rigging. Check. Check. That's one of the things I'd always do on an annual inspection. And for planes that I hadn't annualed before, I would say most of them, at least a high majority of them, weren't rigged properly. In other words, you go inside the cockpit, you set them to open, and you look at the manual, and it says, hey, when they're fully open, it should be 5 inches. You go out there and measure it, and you get 4 or 3. So Harry's looking at it, really? You ever check yours?
Well, it looks open.
It looks there?
How do you know?
Yeah, you gotta, the book tells you, open them up, you measure how the distance that they opened. And there you go.
So how do you
Most,
fix that?
huh?
How do you fix that?
I just re-rig them. It's not a big deal. You just, there's adjust the push-pull cable and all kinds of stuff. Depends on how they are. But it's just part of maintenance. Open during ground. Open during ground. During ground operation. And usually closed at cruise.
So if you need more cooling during flight, you can open.
Open them up. Yep. So if you need more cooling during flight, just open them up. All right. I don't think I have anything new to add here. Let me see what else. Talked about most of this stuff. How about the cooling fins? Cooling fins are a big deal. I keep saying them about everything. So everything in aviation is a big deal. I just write that and then I quit saying that maybe. So what do we do about our cooling fins? Well, we inspect for cracked or bent fins. For cracked or bent fins. I don't think I brought in my service instructions. Let me see. This is one of those things where because Continental is so different than Lycoming, they're very, very different. I always had to reference this stuff. And I want to say that Lycoming is far more lenient on fins, way more lenient. Continental is really strict on their fins. I want to say they're the ones where even if you have a bent fin that is more than halfway to the next one, you have to discard the cylinder.
Oh.
Yeah, you're not allowed to straighten them. And so it's funny, you see people in there working on Continentals, and they're just pushing and pulling baffles and this and that and bending stuff. I'm like, man, you gotta be careful with those fins. You know, you're gonna ruin a cylinder. I know from experience that you can bend them back straight. You can do stuff on home builds. So there's data. So Lycoming has their data. Continental has theirs. And I believe there's also some stuff in 4313 maybe about blending them out. I don't remember exactly. So inspect, I'll just put this B. Service bulletin / service instruction. That's all I need to say about that. Continental, it's SB 96-12, and Lycoming, they have it in the overhaul manual. And then we talked about the pressure baffles. Which is all that stuff around the engine. So that's the aluminum structure, aluminum. Around the cylinders. And engine, of course. They are horribly neglected. And the reason why is, okay, you're working on an annual. We got Super Steve over here working out in the field, mostly because he didn't win the lottery. And you guys are doing a lot of annuals, right? Yeah, are you part of that? Yeah. How often do you guys squawk baffle cracks? Doesn't happen?
No. They're just there. If they're there,
If they're there, they're there. All right? And so what happens is there is a tremendous amount of stress is the word I want to use. We have that really pretty one. There we go, pretty one. There's a lot of stress going on here because let's think about this. What happens to your tappet clearance as the engine warms up? Gets bigger. Why? Engine's growing and contracting, moving and twisting, vibrating. Well, these baffles have no expansion joint. They are just mounted onto here as tight can be. And so as this engine grows this way out, cracks the baffles. And that crack, and then it vibrates, and that crack gets worse and bigger and bigger. And so before you know it, this stuff becomes just junk. And so you have to be up on it at all times. Yeah, he said he had one that would have.
Yeah, on a bear, and I was looking at work, and the baffling was like so vibrated so much, it's literally like enmeshed into like the aluminum meshed into the cylinder into the fins.
Yeah.
And I was like, is this legal? And he goes, it's airworthy. I'm all like, okay, that doesn't look good.
All right, so it's actually really common, especially this inner cylinder baffle, the stuff that goes between the cylinders. Even on the Continentals, especially the smaller ones. So the end of a piece of baffle, it should be square, but it ends up looking like this.
Yeah.
And I don't want to keep doing that all night. And you have all of these spaces here where there's nothing left. So it looks like a comb. I should have just said that. It just looks like a comb now.
Yeah.
Because what's happening is all the fins of the cylinders are wearing through the aluminum until the aluminum is a comb.
It almost looks factory if you didn't know better.
It does. It's done very well. The cylinder vibrating. And so what you're doing then is you're changing the airflow within the engine. So that's the kind of stuff that needs to be changed out. It needs to be repaired. You need to pay attention to it. But Steve pointed out.
The customer didn't want to pay for it. So he's like, okay, if the customer doesn't want to pay for it, then he doesn't want to pay for it.
There you go. So that's the hard part when you're an inspector in a shop, an IA, you have to make these judgment calls. And in our shop, we always had airworthy or recommended. So you can call them squawks. Some shops don't like it. What do you guys call them?
They just call them repairs, like
squawks. Okay, well, it's
or just
no
optional repairs.
No, I'm saying if something is wrong, what do you call it?
something's wrong.
Okay, some shops call it squawks, some say discrepancies. Yeah, it takes longer to write discrepancy. So anyway, so you find this and you say, okay, here's a discrepancy. And I always felt as an inspector, it was you're paying me to inspect your airplane. I'm going to tell you everything that's wrong with it that I can find, whether you like it or not. And then I would circle stuff and say it's airworthy or recommended. So maybe I would see a piece of baffle that was starting to wear. But I would say, well, that's not airworthy. You're not going to crash. Nothing bad's going to happen. So I just recommend it. Hey, baffle's starting to wear. Or you have a bunch of leaks around, air leaks, and I recommend we put RTV. Is that an airworthy issue? No, it's not. It's highly recommended. You might be buying a new engine sooner than you wanted to, but then we'd circle that. Well, that's recommended. So
were those terrible pictures of those bafflings? Like, was that is baffling ever an airworthy thing?
See, and that's the thing. It's really going to come down to the inspector. And one inspector might say, if it's that bad, I'm going to say, you know what, that's an airworthy issue. To me, when it gets that bad, it is. Because now...
When your engine fails in the air.
Well, I start playing it out. All right, okay, so I'm doing the annual today, and I'm like, well, it's a high of 74. Your engine's not being cooled well. That's going to cause an increased wear. You have high temps around the exhaust guides. What's that going to cause? Coking, which is going to lead to sticky valves, which then leads to... You stick a valve in flight, what happens? You lose that cylinder. And if you have a 4-cylinder, you just lost 75%. Well, it's worse than 75% because it takes out a lot with it. So, all right, so that's fine. You're leaving, well, all right. So then play it forward to, okay, pretty soon we're going to be in the middle of summer. It's July. It's been 110 for months on end. And this person decides they want to go up to Columbia.
Oh, density altitude.
In the density altitude, and they're taking off from Columbia, which just takes off over trees. And if you don't clear the trees, then, that's a bad thing. So they take off out of there, stick a valve, and the NTSB says, well, valve stuck because the engine got too hot. The engine got too hot because the baffle wasn't done. Who's the guy who just signed this off? So I don't know. That's maybe a fault that I go that far into stuff, but that's the way I do it. If it's that bad, that's why I say it. If you have customers you're dealing with often, I will say, hey, your baffling is getting pretty bad, right? And, when I say it's getting pretty bad, it's like, yeah, that's going to last another 3 years. And we need to think about replacing this, all right? So let's, next year budget for that and give a good warning. But it's all judgment call unless you have a number. But there is no number that says, like, hey, that fin is bent. I have to eject the cylinder. Well, it's just bent. Yeah, but it says it's bent more than halfway, and I measured it, and it's 75%. Data. It's an easy call. It's the other ones that are hard. So aluminum structure around the cylinders. What did I say? I think I said something about repair cracks as they appear. So repair cracks as they appear. Let's see. Seal holes with RTV. You know what RTV stands for?
Room temperature vulcanization.
Very good. That's just your silicone stuff in a tube. Then we have the flexible seal.
From the commercial? Like seal?
Must be formed in proper direction.
How do you form it?
When you're actually putting it in, sometimes it will go up against something else, or you cut it so that it's rolling one way versus the other. It's all in how you lay it in there. And which way should it be formed?
Towards the high pressure.
Okay, so the sides go up, towards high pressure. Sides go up, back goes like forward and up. Something else I want to say here, let me see. Look for rubbing on cowl as an indication of air leaks. And replace when worn. inner cylinder. Inner cylinder baffles. And these are the ones that go in between the cylinders. You can't see them in any of the pictures. The ones you put on before you put on the intake pipes and the exhaust. So inner cylinder baffles, they direct cooling air. In close contact with the cylinder. There we go. Well, the last thing I talked about was an augmenter. And an augmenter uses exhaust gas. Uses exhaust gas, or gases, to add airflow so that engine is not completely dependent on ram air. What is ram air? Okay, ram air is the air that's rammed in there because the airplane is going forward at 100 plus miles an hour. So how are helicopters cooled?
Big fan.
Nobody cares. Big fan. Where is this big fan?
On the top.
Up on top on the rotor?
Yeah.
No. Right there. It's like a Volkswagen. So this is a helicopter right here. Probably Robinson or something like that. You can see the cylinders right here. And this right here is a belt-driven, usually belt-driven gigantic fan that's going to draw air in here and blow it down across the engine. So this is back. Back of the engine.
So
Way to tilt
blows
them,
it
T-
backwards.
the boom is right here. Boom is going out this way.
So it blows it back towards the engine. Even
No,
though
it sucks it in here through the back of the engine, across and down across the engine, and then it'll
So
trail.
the gearbox is behind, right? Between the engine and this.
It's the opposite of ram air, is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, it's the opposite of ram air. Yes, it's Mar air.
Oh, you are a dad.
All right, Continental actually tried, and I never got to work on one. They tried a water-cooled O200. And I don't know what happened to that. There was I want to say it was an airplane called the Voyager that was one of the Rutan designs. You guys know what Dick and Bert Rutan? They built that airplane. They built a lot of airplanes. Their design is one hanging up in the long easies, very easies. What's that?
There's a little.
Yeah, yep. And then one of them built one. It was called the Voyager.
That's the one that went around the world.
Yeah.
Jaeger and,
That's it. Yeah.
non-stop.
Let me see.
Yeah.
There it is.
Oh yeah.
Look at Boji's girl.
Well, I just took too long. Anyway, if you can see that, hopefully. Very funky plane. But they went around the world nonstop.
Wow.
And I want to, for some reason, I think that this one had water-cooled engines.
Tractor pusher.
Yeah, so
So did it have like mid-air refueling on it, or?
no, they just took gas with them, I think.
It's all in the wings.
Looks like a 70s TV antenna going through the air.
O235. Well, I was wrong about that then. Little tiny engines, air-cooled. Right, rolled out, fitted with world flight in air-cooled Continental. Forward location. And liquid-cooled TCIO. Look at that in the aft. I was right. Woohoo! It's not often. But because Wikipedia says so. So originally flew powered by light-coming O235s with fixed-pitch props. The aircraft was rolled out fitted with world flight engines and air-cooled O240 in the forward and a liquid cooled IOL 200 in the aft.
L is mean liquid?
Yep.
Uh-huh.
Injected, opposed.
Injected, opposed,
Let me see. Oops, not shopping. I don't want to buy one. I wanted images.
Wait, what's LED?
Left rotate.
Liquid. No, liquid.
L should be left-hand rotating, but
Pushing, right? Well, you can change that with just the direction.
well, I was looking for the O2 liquid. Anyway, so that was one of the only horizontally opposed engines that I'm aware of. And so what this engine did is it kind of looks a lot like any other O200 to me. Wish I could make the picture much bigger. But they put cooling water jackets around the outside of it. So it almost looked like they clamped these jackets on, just where the air would normally go, and they just pump water across it. I'm sure they must have done something more than that, but to me, that's sort of what it looked like. So, and of course, we talked about that. The nice thing about water cooling is the temperature is more closely controlled, and so your tolerances can be a lot closer. If you have closer tolerances, you can get more power out of stuff. Well, there's a cylinder.
Wow.
But as I said, you have to deal with the water pump and the extra drag of the radiator. So really, it's still air cooled. It's air to water to engine instead of just air to engine. All right, questions on that stuff?
Yeah, they ever tried water cooling with fins?
Water cooled with fins?
Yeah.
I don't think so.